Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name's theNatMoran and I live in my 4Runner with my 3 dogs full time. I'm currently visiting family in Southern California, so I am off the road for a few weeks, and during that time I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to take advantage of creating this new series that I have been wanting to do. This series is all about me deep diving into the reality of living in a 4Runner with the dogs on different specific topics. I'll be talking about build and how it's evolved and why I chose the platform build out that I did, some of my comfort items that make it a little bit more enjoyable on rough days, how I do things with the dogs, especially in all 4 seasons, how we stay safe on the road, how we stay healthy on the road, how I stay powered on the road, and just all of the topics that come with life in a 4Runner on the road full time. This series will be kicked off in today's video with a Q&A. It's my very first one. I've never done one before and I've really struggled with this Q&A. I'm not going to lie. So over the last couple of weeks, I have collected the most common questions that I have received and I will be briefly touching on them in this Q&A. Some of these topics require their own videos, so you will see some of these topics more elaborately detailed in an upcoming video. If you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss out on this upcoming series. I also want to take a second to say thank you to everyone who's reached out to me over the last couple of weeks. About a month ago, I posted in the discussion forum that I was going to be taking a break from making videos. I didn't really go into detail, so I can imagine that I left it open for everybody to make assumptions. So I just want to say real quick, the dogs and I are doing fine. Nothing happened to them. We just needed a break. That break is officially over with the kickoff of this series, so let's go ahead and jump right on in. So the first question, if you could only have 3 items, what would they be? I've decided instead of items to do categories because I don't think that I could narrow it down to 3 items just to live on, but I feel that I could narrow it down to 3 categories. A dedicated cooking area, a comfortable sleeping area, and enough power. Each of these topics either have their own video or segments in an upcoming video, so I will elaborate a little bit more on that. The next question, how do you stay cool in the summer with the dogs? This is one that requires its own video, and that's because I have so much feedback on this topic. The dogs and I really struggled in the summer. This last few months were really brutal. We experienced so many triple-digit days, and it really kind of derailed us a lot and forced us to stay in hotels or with friends much more than I normally would. But in this video, I will briefly touch on some of the tips and tricks for living in the 4Runner with 3 dogs in the summer. Now, before I jump into this, I want to say that my dogs are my #1 priority. Their well-being and safety is my #1 concern. So summer is very difficult, and I have had to make a lot of changes, and I plan to make a lot of changes before next summer. So when it comes to camping, find shady areas next to water. That's a huge help when it's really hot. The dogs and I can jump in the water and we can cool off. The only challenge that I had with that was I was in locations that were heavily infested with the blue-green algae, and that's not safe to drink or swim in, and it's exceptionally dangerous for dogs. So I really struggled with that. I found this one killer spot in Wyoming, and it was the whole lake was covered in this blue-green algae. And just the week before I got there, they had shut down the lake for swimming and drinking. So that was a challenge because it was pretty toasty with the sun beaten down, and there was no shade at that location. So we ended up having to leave a little bit earlier. But one thing I would always try to do is find shade and water for the dogs. When it comes to running errands, this one's a little bit more challenging because you're subject to hours of operation. But my recommendation and things that I tried to do was to do all of my errands when the sun was down. So either early in the morning or late at night. In the event I could not do that or make that happen, I would try to be mindful of the temperature and where the sun was. So when I did have to go in and run errands and I couldn't pick up my groceries quick just through an online order, I would look for places that had a tree or a shady spot out of the sun. I would try to park in a way that avoided direct sun hitting my car, and I would put up my reflectants in the windows. That would help kind of pull the heat out or push it away from the car. I would crack the windows and hopefully get some air circulation, and sometimes I would even open my sunroof to let the hot air out. I have a portable rechargeable fan that I would blow in the direction of the dogs, and I would actually plug it into one of my power banks. That way it never ran out of charge. This helped keep things circulated and offer a little bit of a breeze. So in the event that I knew it was gonna take me more than about 15 minutes, I would blast the AC running and get that car as cold as possible in addition to all of the other steps. And my primary focus, as I said, is to make sure that their well-being is taken care of and they are happy and healthy. So one thing I'm considering doing going forward is buying a portable AC unit. I considered buying one right before I got to my family's house in Southern California because of all of the triple-digit days I had experienced. Unfortunately, I did not land on one, so I'm still doing research, and when I do figure out which one I'm going to get, I will share that with you all. The next question is, are you able to find campsites without neighbors, or do you usually have neighbors nearby? In short, absolutely, you can find good campsites without neighbors, but they usually come with a downside. They're usually exceptionally remote. They have a really rough 4x4 road that you have to go on, or they don't have cell phone coverage. Now, there are occasions where you can find really awesome remote campsites that it's easily accessible, it has cell phone coverage, but I'm gonna be honest, they're pretty rare in the places that I've been. In the long answer, I typically don't have that luxury, and I'm usually within some proximity of a neighbor. On weekends and holidays during the summer, I tend to have more neighbors than I can deal with, and I have to channel my inner Gusfraba in order to maintain composure. I usually end up packing up and leaving. My biggest challenge is that I need to have Verizon cell phone, so I am very limited on my camping. If I didn't have that limitation, it would open a broad, wide spectrum of locations I could go to. Now, on my Patreon, I do post some of my favorite GPS locations that have Verizon coverage, and I leave a little bit of a description about those sites. If you're interested in accessing those locations, check out my Patreon. To give you all some tips on how to avoid the crowds, I would recommend not arriving at camp on a Friday through Monday. Those are the more popular days for arrival and departure, so your chances of finding a really killer spot are pretty slim. Not impossible, but slim. Winter months are always my favorite when it comes to finding campsites, because I can generally go to the very popular campsites and not have very many neighbors, because there's only a handful of people who are actually out there doing some camping during the cold months. When you get to a campground, survey it and try to find the best spot that has the most privacy. Things to look for would be tree coverage dividing your campgrounds, rocks or boulders, or even a hill or a mound of some sort kind of separating you from the next campground. Now, if you're in a spot where the campgrounds are pretty close to each other and it's really hard to find privacy, try to park your rig in a way that blocks off the majority of the people so that you can kind of have a little centralized area that's private. Finding free camping in a good location is not always easy to do. iOverlander is one of my favorite apps that are out there. I also use Free Roam, Dirt, Campendium, freecampsites.net, and Google Maps to help me find quality campsites. I do recommend, though, that if you're going to be in a place that doesn't have good data coverage with your cell phone provider, that you download the maps ahead of time so that you're not disrupted when you're trying to locate campsites. The next question is, do I work in my tent or in my car? When I had the rooftop tent on the 4Runner, I typically worked up there. Now that I don't have the rooftop tent, I built the platform in the 4Runner to have a convertible space where I could take part of the platform out and move the rear single seat. On sunny days or nice weather days, I will work outside if it's not too loud. The next question is, I know you have Verizon. Do you find that that's enough data to work on the road? For the most part, the answer is yes. I have found that having Verizon has been very successful to me, and there's only been a couple of instances where I had to relocate because I didn't have coverage. Moving from campsite to campsite for me does require a lot of planning ahead of time. I have to be mindful of the location, if it's got Verizon coverage, if it has good Verizon coverage, if it's a safe location, if it's got water accessible, or if there's shade or sun. I have a lot of things I have to prepare for before I go looking for a new campsite. I use Verizon's coverage map heavily. It helps me identify if a location I'm interested in camping at has good quality coverage. I've been in situations where I've had full 5 or 4 bars of Verizon and had absolutely no data. So I really try to focus on the data versus the bars. I did install a WeBoost to help with this in certain areas, because the further out you go on some of these back roads to find camping, the worse your internet becomes because you're further away from a tower. I have found that the WeBoost doesn't really make that big of a difference. There's only been 1 or 2 instances where I could see a noticeable change in my data. So I would not use the WeBoost as a reliable source of data boosting. I have been considering switching to Starlink for my internet, but I'm still in the research phases, so if that changes, I will definitely let you all know. The next question transitions to a fun topic, and that is, when you are not working or hiking, what do you do for fun? Well, I'm gonna be honest, I'm probably hiking, but since I'm not allowed to use that as an example, we'll switch on over to the other topics. If I'm not working or hiking, I am probably off-roading with friends, or I am editing or making video, or I'm watching my favorite shows. Just like you, I have my favorite YouTube channels that I like to keep caught up on, and I'm also watching some of the new TV shows out right now, like House of the Dragon and The Rings of Power. Next question is, how often do you stay in one spot? I'm having to call myself out on this one because I don't stay in places very long. I'm usually not staying in a location more than a week, and that's because I get antsy and run out of food. My cooking situation, though it has improved, I did end up having to switch over from a portable 12-volt fridge to a cooler, and that made a huge negative impact on my cooking situations. In my most recent platform, I do have a designated space for a pantry, and I absolutely love the design, and I will get into that more in an upcoming video, but my cooler can only hold about 4 or 5 days worth of fresh foods, and though I can stock up on canned foods and go for a long time, I prefer to have fresh food to eat, so I'm pretty limited to what can fit in my cooler, and that's about 4 or 5 days. I hope you found this Q&A informative and helpful. If you did, give the video a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family or anyone that you think would benefit from this content. I am looking forward to sharing these discussions with you, and if there's anything you'd like me to elaborate on or have a topic on, leave me a comment below. Reach out to me on my email, which is in the description of this video, my Patreon, or on my Instagram. But all right, that's gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I hope you all stay safe and have a very blessed day. Bye.